The view from the plane headed to Hawaii was breathtaking, but I never expected that my ex-girlfriend from middle school would be sitting next to me. On top of that, she started bringing up the past, going on and on about how worthless I am. And then, without me even asking, she talked about how happy her life is now, how she's married to a rich man, and how much she's needed by her husband. Just then, an announcement came over the intercom. Is there anyone on board who can fly a plane? It seems there was a serious issue. It's shocking that they're looking for a pilot, not a doctor. Passengers began to realize the gravity of the situation, with murmurs of, "Pilot, is this plane okay?" Then, a flight attendant, while looking around, saw me and exclaimed, "Oh, it's you." That's when an incident to shut my ex-girlfriend up occurred. My name is Jake. Ever since I was a kid, I had an unusual fascination with airplanes. To be honest, I was interested in anything that could fly. Seeing birds and insects soaring freely in the sky always looked beautiful and cool. I wished I could fly too, thinking if I tried hard enough, maybe I'd grow wings. I genuinely believed that. But sadly, no matter how hard I'd ride, wings didn't sprout. When I was 5 and feeling pretty down about it, I saw an airplane for the first time. It was amazing to see this non-living chunk of metal flying through the sky. It happened during a family vacation with my parents. That gigantic bird soaring in the sky left such an impression. It became a symbol of freedom for me. Since then, my affection shifted from cars and trains to airplanes. I became a boy who deeply loved airplanes. I'd memorize names of aircraft and airlines, spending my days looking at them in books. Seeing my passion, my parents would drive me to the airport every week, although they didn't take me on a flight. They thought seeing planes in action would be better for me. My parents and my much younger siblings never gazed at planes with the same admiration I did, but they always listened with a smile when I excitedly talked about them. Naturally, my dream was to become a pilot. I wanted to control an airplane and fly in the skies. It was the first dream I ever had in my life. Even now, I think it's a bit unusual for a kid to have such a realistic dream from the get-go. My dad would say, to become a pilot, you have to study hard, and I was the bright student for my age. I felt that studying was a small price to pay if it meant flying a plane someday. My teachers always said, the secret to improving in your studies is to have a clear vision of your future dream. I truly felt that way. If what it took to become a pilot was studying, then I'd gladly dive into my studies. Moreover, when my dad said, I heard that if you have cavities, you can't become a pilot, I brushed my teeth harder than anyone else. I reckon I got so good at it that I could have become a dental hygienist. Mind you, it's not true for all pilots that having cavities is a deal breaker. Only those flying certain fighter jets can have them due to the effects of air pressure. If someone said that you need to be physically fit to be a pilot, then I'd double down on weight training and exercise. Anyway, my childhood was more about planes than playing around. Once I reached middle school, I began seriously considering my path towards becoming a pilot. I believed that without attending a reputable high school or college, I wouldn't be able to fly an airplane, so I continued to work hard in both my studies and physical activities. During middle school years, I was also concerned about my friendships. I made an effort to get along with everyone, trying not to make unnecessary enemies. While I avoided people who brought unnecessary stress, I aimed to connect with as many people as possible, absorbing everything I could and making it a part of me. Though it's a bit embarrassing to say, I was relatively popular among girls. Getting attention from girls became more frequent, and honestly, it felt good. Guy friends would ask how I got so much attention from the girls, but since I wasn't studying or exercising to be popular, I couldn't give them a satisfying answer. Amidst all this, a girl confessed her feelings and wanted to date me. Her name was Susan. She was the most beautiful girl in our grade, popular among both students and teachers. Being approached by such a beauty, I was over the moon and couldn't find a reason to refuse her. I said yes without thinking seriously. It was my first time dating a girl, and I had no idea that Susan would be so much trouble. She became upset whenever I talked to someone, a male or female, whom she didn't know. I'd often buy her something just to improve her mood. She demanded things like deleting contacts of the girls from my phone and expected immediate replies to her texts. She was incredibly self-centered and seldom thought of others. Out of the blue, she'd say things like, "I want you to be my ideal boyfriend," and this cut into my study and exercise time. She insisted, "You should spend every weekend just for me. Oh, and you're paying for our dates, of course. It's terrible to make your girlfriend pay." Such demands were too much for a middle school student. Over time, being with Susan felt increasingly suffocating. One summer during middle school, my father tragically passed away in an accident. Losing my dad, who looked forward to and had high hopes for my future more than anyone else, was really tough for me in middle school. Often, I would see my mom, once vibrant and full of life, look worn out and lifeless. Although I wanted to cheer her up, I was so overwhelmed with my own feelings that I couldn't offer much help. Our family was engulfed in profound grief. After losing our beloved father, a man we all admired, every one of us had to fight harder to live our lives. My mom, who had been a stay-at-home mom until then, started working outside. Consequently, she couldn't take care of my younger brother anymore, so I stepped in. Naturally, this meant less time for studying and sports, but it was a necessary sacrifice. It wasn't a hardship if it was for the sake of the family. Of course, the time I cut back wasn't limited to just that. I also reduced the time I spent with Susan. "Why haven't you been in touch?" Susan asked me. When I explained my family's situation, she retorted, "So what? If your mom's working, that's fine. And you don't need to take care of your younger brother. She can do that when she gets back from work." I couldn't believe my ears. I was horrified that she could act so callously toward a family grieving the loss of a father, just because she felt neglected by me. I told her, "I don't need a girlfriend who can't show compassion during such tough times," and broke up with Susan. I didn't want my mental stability jeopardized by her anymore. However, later at school, the story had twisted into Susan dumping me. On top of that, she spread all sorts of rumors and bad-mouthed me to everyone. I saw her true colors, but honestly, with everything going on, I just felt indifferent. To help my family out even a little, I thought about skipping high school and getting a job. My mom was against it, but after some persuasion, she tearfully gave her permission. All I can really do is physical work and study, so I thought about finding a job that would utilize those skills. On graduation day, Susan, somehow finding out I wasn't going to high school, teased me about it. "You're not going to high school?" Without making eye contact, I simply replied, "Yup," and tried to distance myself from Susan. From behind, she said, "In this day and age, not going to high school. You must have such low ambitions, you'll be at the bottom forever." I figured I'd probably never see her again. No need to get worked up over someone like her, so I ignored her and left the school. Now, time has passed, and I'm currently going through domestic flight check-in procedures. I'm on a personal trip heading to Hawaii. I'm a bit embarrassed to admit that I've never been to Hawaii, so I'm really looking forward to it from deep within. My impression of Hawaii is that it has beautiful beaches and a lot of rich flavored dishes. But it's quite a far place, so I just never found the time to visit. Even thinking about sightseeing there, I'd be torn about where to go, and I probably would have just ended up staying in the hotel, which is why I never had the courage to go alone. However, one of my friends opened a restaurant. I decided to go there to celebrate. I decided to have a friend show me around Hawaii during this visit, so I planned to take my time and see the sights. I couldn't help but feel like a giddy kid with this much excitement, but oh well. I comfortably settled into my seat. There's something about the slight hustle and bustle inside the plane right before takeoff that I genuinely enjoy. I placed my carry-on under the seat and found myself gazing out the window, lost in the view outside. Even before taking off, the view from this window offered sights that you just can't see anywhere else, and I'm already a little thrilled. I must say, I snagged one of the best seats. Located a bit away from the wing, I had a clear, unobstructed view. It was just awesome. With a little time before takeoff, I let my imagination wander, picturing the breathtaking views above the clouds. The plane I'm on was pretty much full, almost packed to capacity. Yet, nobody was sitting next to me. I wonder if no one booked a seat, or maybe they were running late. Either way, I had mixed feelings. Considering how crowded it is, I feel a bit guilty enjoying this extra space all to myself. For now, I decided to just gaze out the window and ride out this awkward moment. Bang! There was a loud sound as someone hurriedly took the seat next to me. This last-minute passenger fumbled with her belongings even after sitting down, bumping their elbow into me. Yet, not a single sorry came out of her mouth. On top of that, she reeked of strong perfume and cosmetics. I hadn't encountered someone this inconsiderate since middle school. She reminded me of unpleasant people, catching a faint reflection of the adjacent seat on the window glass. I noticed something dark over her eyes. Probably sunglasses. That's all I could discern. However, wearing sunglasses on a plane struck me as rather snooty. Might be a bit judgmental, though. After some fidgeting, the classless passenger next to me sneaked a glance at my face. I inadvertently responded by looking back. I regretted it instantly. Though she was heavily made up and looked quite flashy, I had seen her before. Someone I'd rather forget. Well, if it isn't little dropout boy, how've you been? I felt a chill as I wondered if my journey, which was already taking a bad turn, would continue this way, taking off under stormy skies. If I do say so myself, that was a pretty apt comparison. Seeing my silence, she said, "Forgot about me. Surely, you haven't forgotten how I dumped you," and took off her sunglasses. It was indeed Susan from middle school, whom I dated. Her face remains strikingly beautiful, but it's clear from her first words that her attitude hasn't changed one bit. Hasn't it been since graduation? Long time no see. Never thought I'd run into you here of all places. Flying in planes, for a dropout like you. How bold. Oh, or maybe you're off to join a tuna fishing boat. Looks like her attitude is unchanged. Good to see she's well. Susan, ever the chatterbox with her sarcastic remarks. She's so adept at belittling people that it seems she forgets to breathe, firing off insults at me one after another. Truly a piece of work, that woman. I simply replied, just a vacation, and focused on the view outside, wanting to minimize any further interaction with her. The plane seemed ready for takeoff and began to slowly move. I was looking forward to a pleasant flight, but now it feels like I'm plunging straight into hell because of one seatmate. I'd rather be peacefully asleep on the wing at this point. Susan seemed offended by my cold demeanor. After an audible tisk, she started rattling off things toward me. About how awful I was as a boyfriend, how her high school boyfriend was way more handsome, how the time with me was a waste. She bombarded me with comments that begged for a response. After high school, Susan apparently married into wealth through some circumstances. I wasn't paying much attention, so all I remember is she married someone wealthy. Apparently, Susan, who hit the jackpot, is going on a luxurious trip to Hawaii. I'm going to stay in a fancy hotel you could never afford in a lifetime and enjoy the resort, she said. By the way, her husband seems head over heels for Susan, and he revolves his life around her. Well, I guess some people are like that. I hope he cherishes Susan forever since he's a strange individual. If she ever lost him, I doubt she'd ever marry again. tuning out Susan's self-centered chatter. It's me just going along with it. Even in moments like this, the view from the plane was breathtaking. Soon after takeoff, the view below turned completely white as we rose above the clouds. No matter how bad the weather is, if you wait a bit and rise above the clouds, a bright blue sky always shines. The beautiful blue sky always sits above the clouds, peeking through gaps to see the ground below. But I wonder, when will these neighboring clouds clear up? People like you, the lowly ones, rarely get the chance to fly, so this view must be unique to you, she mockingly says, not missing a beat. Furthermore, Susan claimed she's flown many times before and has grown tired of the same old view, so she can't be bothered to look out the window anymore. Why does she go to such lengths to degrade herself? It's good to have high self-esteem, but I just couldn't grasp why she would actively lower her worth in the eyes of others. I can't believe I once dated someone like her. If I ever have kids, I'll drill this into their heads. It's just too bad to have a blotch on one's life as early as middle school. Honestly, I find it hard to believe that just because you've flown many times, you'd get tired of the view outside. The scenery shows a different face depending on the day and time, so you'll never truly see the same view twice. Seems like such a waste to me. It was while she was passionately going on about how amazing she is. "Is there a doctor on board?" came the announcement. It's a line you often hear in TV shows, but this was the first time I've heard it in real life. I wonder if someone's fallen ill and needs medical attention. I was worried, but there wasn't anything I could do. I decided to wait quietly, but the airhead next to me had a different idea. "Wait, what's going on? It's like something straight out of a drama. What's got this woman so riled up?" Such behavior, especially when someone on board might be seriously ill and in need of a doctor. I knew it. She definitely has a few screws missing. With those thoughts, as I scanned the plane, another announcement came through. "Is there anyone on board who can pilot this plane?" Even I was taken aback by that one. When the announcement was made that a doctor was needed, passengers were a bit restless. Not as much as Susan though, but when they called for a pilot, the cabin truly erupted in commotion. Is this plane even okay with the pilot like this? And does the pilot need a doctor? Voices calling for the flight attendants could be heard throughout the cabin. It's understandable. First needing a doctor and then the pilot. Something must have happened to him. Susan's face grew increasingly pale and she began to panic. What the heck? Is this plane going to crash or what? Why does she say something unnecessary? Mentioning a crash in a situation like this could cause a full-blown panic in the cabin. That's why I dislike people who can't read the room. Unsurprisingly, a flight attendant hurried over to Susan, who was loudly using the word crash. "Ma'am, nothing of the sort will happen. Please, wait in your seat." Susan was arguing with the flight attendant, but the attendant skillfully urged her to sit back down. Then the flight attendant looked at me. "Are you by any chance Jake?" I locked eyes with her and asked, "Oh, is it that serious?" "Oh, thank goodness you are here. I'm truly sorry to ask, but can you help?" "I see, it must be a big deal." Considering she's gone this far, maybe what Susan said isn't entirely wrong. I nodded in agreement and stood up from my seat. "What are you doing? If you're just going to be in the way, better sit here and shake in your boots. The pathetic one here is you, Susan." I almost snapped back, but managed to hold my tongue. The flight attendant asked, "Is she with you?" To which I firmly denied. "Just an old acquaintance. We just happened to sit next to each other, nothing more. She's no relation to me," I explained. I wanted to head to the cockpit right away, but Susan gripped my arm tightly and wouldn't let go. "Where do you think you're going in this situation?" Even though I asked her to let go, Susan showed no intention of doing so. I was wondering what to do when the flight attendant intervened. "Ma'am, I apologize for the inconvenience, but Jake is one of our pilots. There's an urgent matter he needs to attend to." Saying that, She exerted a polite yet forceful pressure to detach Susan's hand. "You're a pilot?" Susan said, eyes wide in surprise. I replied with a simple yes and headed to the cockpit. Around the cockpit, a group of flight attendants had gathered and were visibly alarmed. I learned that both the captain and the co-pilot were showing symptoms of food poisoning. By chance, there was a doctor on board who was examining the two. However, they showed no signs of recovery, and their symptoms were getting worse. Therefore, it became clear that piloting the plane under these conditions would be challenging, leading to an urgent announcement from the cockpit. Acute gastroenteritis can strike out of the blue, so perhaps it was unavoidable. But for both of them to get gastroenteritis, that's either incredibly bad luck or a miracle. The odds seem pretty low. Many familiar faces were around the cockpit, and when they saw me, they said, "Wow, how lucky that Jake was on board too." Both pilots having gastroenteritis, a doctor happening to be on that plane, and even a pilot being present, it feels like I've used up a lifetime's worth of luck just on these astronomical odds. According to the doctor, the co-pilot's symptoms seemed milder than the captain's, but he was just barely able to hold a conversation. However, he seemed really rough with sweat on his brow. I managed to get in touch with the control tower and took my seat in the cockpit. The tension and excitement never get old. Having passengers on board brought immense pressure upon me. When I first started flying, the thought of having the lives of passengers in my hands made me so nervous I felt like throwing up. But at the same time, there was a breathtaking view that only pilots get to see. A beautiful scene that passengers can't quite experience from the cabin. The warm rays of the sun lit up the surroundings. Even the thick clouds below looked like a beautiful backdrop. That sense of exhilaration only a pilot feels always filled my heart. I often wonder if some kind of hormone is flooding my brain. Being here is pure joy. Well, for me at least. I once mentioned this to a flight attendant and was immediately dismissed as weird. I feel bad for Susan. She never experienced such a sight and still got tired of it. The plane landed safely in Hawaii, ensuring the safety of all passengers and crew on board. Immediately after that, the captain and the co-pilot headed to the hospital. The doctor who had been attending to them said, "I'm glad you were there. If I was alone, everyone would have ended up in the hospital. Just those two going is enough," chuckling and stroking his beard. What an inappropriate thing for a doctor to say. But well, he's probably trying to show his appreciation in his own way. Even though the landing was safe, from the company's perspective, it's still a big deal. As a result, after arriving in Hawaii, paperwork and reports took so long that I was only free by sunset. As initially planned, I headed straight to my friend's new shop at top speed. Of course, I drove safely. The store was already bustling with many customers. My friend and the owner, Bob, saw me and immediately burst into a wide grin, exclaiming, "Glad you could make it," and giving me a hearty pat on the back. "I heard you had quite the day, steering a passenger plane on the fly. Where did he get that info?" I didn't feel like bragging, so I hadn't intended to talk about it, but if he already knew, I guess I should explain. The forceful pat from the muscular Bob left my back tingling. Rubbing the sore spot, I sat down and recounted the day's events. "That's an incredible story. Can't believe it's been 5 years since you retired. Time flies," Bob laughed. Indeed, the passing of 5 years does make me feel the cruel march of time. "Are you a friend of the owner?" a gentle voice inquired from behind me. Turning around, a distinguished-looking gentleman was smiling at me. Next to him was a rather, "Excuse me, Susan." Bob replied to the gentleman with a smile. "It seems he's a regular at this place. He was my buddy back in the service days. This guy was top-notch, you know. He was stationed at the Langley Air Force Base with the 4th Air Wing, 11th Flight Squadron," he explained thoroughly. I thought the gentleman wouldn't understand such detailed information, but his eyes lit up as he exclaimed, "Wait, you mean the Blue Angels?" Turns out, he had once dreamed of becoming a pilot. However, due to an accident when he was a child, he almost lost vision in his right eye and had to reluctantly give up that dream. Same as me. To remember names of aircraft, airline companies, and even military divisions, this guy must be a serious aviation enthusiast. It had been a while since I'd met someone so passionate about planes, so I couldn't help but chat animatedly with him. Even though I was here for Bob's celebration, I got sidetracked with this engaging conversation. The gentleman was particularly fond of the Blue Angels. He raved about their air shows, saying they are truly spectacular. Interrupting our heated conversation was none other than Susan. "Excuse me," she chimed in gracefully. "Oh, I'm sorry," the gentleman scratched his head. "I got a bit carried away there." I thought she didn't deserve an apology, but from their interaction, it seemed they were a couple, so I held my tongue. In the course of our chat, he learned Susan and I went to the same middle school, which once again piqued the gentleman's interest. He bombarded me with various questions. "So, where are you now?" he inquired. I told him I'm a commercial pilot. He seemed puzzled by my answer. "Well, it makes sense. Bob and I are buddies from our military days, and if you love planes, you'd naturally want to fly fighter jets. The thing is, I had a car accident a while back and couldn't fly fighter jets anymore, but I still loved the sky, so I switched to the commercial sector." I explained the whole situation. 5 years ago, on a rainy day, I was crossing the street at an intersection when a car ran the red light and hit me. The driver was distracted, looking elsewhere. Though I received compensation and settled the matter, it doesn't mean I hold a grudge. However, because of that accident, I fractured my left leg and had to spend a significant amount of time in rehab. Because of this, I didn't meet the required flight hours, and I lost my pilot's license. I also developed complications from the accident, meaning I could no longer fly the more demanding fighter jets. At that time, I was truly devastated. It was a dream I had since I was a child, and my late father had always been my biggest supporter. But this was all thanks to my dad's teachings. He always used to tell me, "The past is the past. No use dwelling on it. Just do your best in the present." If I kept dwelling on the past, I wouldn't be able to achieve even what I could. When I found out I couldn't fly fighter jets anymore, the higher-ups suggested I move to a department primarily dealing with paperwork, but I couldn't give up on flying, so I left the military and transitioned to the private sector. Becoming a commercial pilot was more challenging than I expected, facing various obstacles. But I never gave up. The sky is where I belong. There's nowhere else for me. After finishing my story, Susan's husband, teary-eyed, he said, "I've never met someone as incredible as you. Your never-give-up spirit is truly admirable. Would you mind if we kept in touch?" As he took out his cell phone. I couldn't possibly refuse after such a heartfelt request. Plus, being praised felt pretty good, not gonna lie. After that, we continued to talk about planes, engrossed in our conversation. Throughout that time, Susan looked down, appearing rather diminished. Susan's husband introduced himself as Mike. He owned several properties in resort areas like Hawaii and was a well-known wealthy man in that realm. It seems that what Susan told me on the plane about marrying into wealth wasn't a lie. Honestly, I was quite skeptical. Mike, even after our meeting in Hawaii, kept in touch quite frequently and was a straight-shooter kind of guy. He had a stickler for details kind of attitude, didn't tolerate any wrongdoing, and seemed to be trusted by many. That such a man chose Susan as a life partner, I wondered if she had somehow drugged him. Then, I received a message on my phone from Susan. "Please never tell my husband that we dated in the past. Don't jeopardize my happiness," it read. For my part, I had no desire to have any more involvement with Susan. But considering Mike, maybe it would be best to spill the beans. It's quite a dilemma. However, Susan probably has some awareness that she wasn't entirely honest with me back then. I doubt her character changed just because of that plain incident, but she likely played her cards right to marry into money. If she went to those lengths, I guess I shouldn't be the one to ruin it. Although, it's quite comical when I think about it. But to be honest, even if I don't tell Mike about Susan's true nature, sooner or later, he'll see her for who she really is. Until then, I hope he enjoys the happiness he has. I replied with a simple understood. After that, I received no further messages from her. It seems Susan will continue to hide her past from her husband. In other words, she probably can't live any other way now. She likely live in fear of her past and those she harassed being exposed. That's the responsibility and consequence of her past actions. The past never truly goes away. Some time had passed since I traveled to Hawaii. I happened to bump into Mike at the airport. But the Mike I saw there looked considerably thinner and appeared quite worn out. When I spoke to him, he said that he and his wife, Susan, had divorced. Some time after the incident in Hawaii, a friend of Susan's visited their home. Due to work commitments, Mike was at home. Thinking not to disturb the two, he was working on his computer in a room next to the guest room. The visiting friend was from Susan's middle school days, and they spoke so loudly that Mike couldn't help but overhear. In between crude laughter, they mentioned people, probably classmates from middle school, using derogatory nicknames. It turned out I was one of them. Hearing Susan and her friend laughing about men with money being the best, Mike lost his temper. He stormed out of his study and yelled at them to get out right now. He tossed both Susan and her friend out of the house and didn't let them in that day. Later, he found out that Susan had been spending their savings without permission and wasting money. When confronted, Susan retorted that he was stingy for a rich man. Initially, Mike felt that if she changed, they could try again, but Susan just said things like, "I never thought you'd be so tight-fisted, and I'm embarrassed not to have designer things." Well, hearing that, I wasn't very surprised at all. The more Susan berated Mike, the further his heart drifted away from her. Mike ran out of patience and brought up divorce. Interestingly, her attitude changed drastically. She began saying things like she didn't want to split and that it was just a play on words. Did she think he wouldn't consider divorce up to this point? It seemed her mind was really only focused on herself. When Mike threatened to take her to court with a lawyer because of her persistence, she reluctantly signed the divorce papers. They continued to have disputes over the division of assets, but Mike said they finally settled everything recently. Mike sighed. "I thought she was a wonderful woman, but I never expected her true nature to be like that." I wholeheartedly agreed. It's not about appearances. While it's understandable for good-looking people to be popular when young, as adults, being with someone whose personality doesn't mesh becomes a pain, regardless of their looks. After divorcing Mike, Susan went back to her hometown and is now living with her parents. Being a stay-at-home wife before, she's having difficulty finding a work, and she's living modestly, especially since she's being asked to pay back the money she squandered. What goes around, comes around, I believe. It's not just with Mike. Throughout her life, she seemed to have looked down on others, and now it seems all that karma is coming back to her. After hearing Mike's story at the airport, I bid him farewell. As I left the airport, I looked up at the sky. Unfortunately, it was overcast. But I knew. Above the gloomy overcast sky, the clear blue stretches on endlessly. I believe that the view from the cockpit is a privilege reserved for pilots. If Susan could be moved by such sights, I think she might finally find her humanity. There are many challenges in continuing a pilot's career. But feeling motivated by the beauty of that view makes the effort worthwhile. Today, I'm determined to keep pushing forward, to witness more beautiful vistas and ensure the safety of my passengers.